I don't know if this is clickbait or what. I'm totally on the Classic Plus hopium train here. I really want Classic Plus. So it's like, what are we talking about? What are we talking about? It's never going to work. I'm curious if there's any good points. I'm curious on what he's going to say here. So yeah, without further ado, let's take a look.
Listen up, everybody.
I'm listening.
I have bad news.
Oh, no.
I don't think Blizzard knows what Classic Plus is.
Okay.
In fact, I don't even think World of Warcraft players know what Classic Plus is, what it could or should look like.
Yeah, you just make it like RuneScape. You have the community vote on what happens next. So that way, over the course of many years, it becomes this beautiful thing that was community crafted, just like RuneScape. Instead of trying to guess what it is, instead of taking any one person's opinion on what it is, you put a poll in the game, you vote 70+% approval rate, and you put in what the majority of people actually want and what the majority of people will actually consume and play and enjoy. And if you're in the minority, then, you know, that sucks. But for everybody else, it's going to be a great experience. And that's pretty much it, because everyone else is going to disagree on what they actually want. So yeah, you put in the voting booth. Should we close the video out now?
Whether it'll deliver leveling focused content or just be a geared treadmill for the endgame, or if any of these options are even possible. Will it just be an incremental release of new raids and dungeons until we've power crept anything and everything from 2006? Will it be zone expansions, leveling overhauls, new professions, all of the above? Or will it get inspired by old school RuneScape and integrate a more curated sandbox methodology to its design?
I would love that.
But to be honest with you, I think none of these things will work. And here's why.
Okay, I'm listening.
Think back for a moment to a different time. 2019, Classic WoW just released. And even then, the idea of what comes next has been a constant, a conversation in-game and not. And for the longest time, Blizzard has been about as vague about it as one would expect Blizzard to be. Truthfully, just like the players, they had no idea and were comfortable in allowing their subscribers to relive the nostalgia with a few minor changes, not just of classic vanilla Warcraft, but also the expansions preceding it. Now we're past the original game's player peak and are seeing an eerily similar trend get repeated once more. This isn't surprising. Blizzard has essentially opted to repeat history. No one should be scratching their heads over why the active player counts aren't booming. And now their backs are thoroughly up against a wall, facing the very real possibility of labeling Warlords of Draenor Classic and releasing what is widely considered to be the worst expansion in the game's history.
I really hope they don't do it, man. Blizzard, don't do it. Yeah, like, they probably will too, which is crazy. They probably will. Oh,
they need to think of something, anything, and fast. All of those quiet conversations from 2019 suddenly need to be acknowledged, actually acknowledged, not in a snide way like in Season of Discovery, but in a legitimate way, because most of the players left playing Classic aren't likely to transition to whatever retail WoW has become. Players and content creators alike are known to wax poetic about the future. All the unreleased content that Blizzard wanted to add in 2004 but simply didn't have the time. Yet today,
in Blizzard's defense, not to defend a multi-billion-dollar company, but like just using my brain here, people really wanted no changes, so much so that there was a hashtag movement created called #NoChanges. You guys remember? We made it loud and clear we wanted nothing different on launch. There was a very big movement that we wanted nothing different at all. So in Blizzard's defense, like, they were thinking about, oh, how should we change this and that? And everyone was like, nothing. So Blizzard did their absolute best to change nothing because that's what the community wanted. Right now, the community is kind of changing tune a bit, saying, look, we've played Classic with no changes and it's great, but like, we would like to continue playing Classic forever. And for that, we need a live updated Classic experience. So we're going to need like live update servers, new content. We need changes, right? So in Blizzard's defense, like they did listen to the community at the time and gave us nothing new. And now we kind of want some stuff that's new.
I have the same issues with those old conversations from 2019 as I did back then. None of them, for whatever reason, acknowledge the fact that World of Warcraft may just not fit this model, this Classic Plus concept.
Okay,
On its surface, implementation looks fairly simple, right? This worked, so do more of it. But why did this work? In a few of my videos, I said that Classic, the original, still holds up today because of the emergent gameplay that it birthed. From Dire Maul tributes to guild collusions and world buff orchestration, as well as the simpler things like lining up to wait for mob spawns and random pickup groups to raid a gnoll camp. The leveling experience is the best in any theme park MMO ever, and the interpersonal connections forged in the fires of tedious molten core runs were unlike anything in the genre, back then and as 2019 proved, still today. But if there's anything that Blizzard has fundamentally lacked the capacity to acknowledge, let alone replicate, is that emergence. Blizzard is compulsively obsessed with balancing out every single aspect of player-driven creativity and labeling it an exploit. Dire Maul runs would not exist in any version of WoW other than Classic and maybe TBC. I don't want to make this video about all the pitfalls of time-gated slop bullshit plaguing retail WoW's otherwise exceptional gameplay, so let's instead mention the fact that Season of Discovery was closer in philosophy to retail than it was to Classic. The gameplay was still Classic WoW, sort of. They had some creative ideas for class design and some not-so-creative shoehorning of abilities from future expansions.
I have so many thoughts. Okay. First of all, I think retail has its own thing to offer if you look at it through a different lens. I think in terms of like the Mythic Plus experience, I think in terms of novel raid experiences, it does a really good job. And in terms of a collection sim, it actually does a pretty good job as well. If you want it to feel like a classic MMO, it does not do a good job at all. If you want it to feel like an MMO period, it doesn't do a good job at all. But we have to kind of define these things. I think just calling it slop for the case of calling it slop doesn't really make much sense unless we define these things. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, like, for me, one of the weaker parts of retail, like especially in PvP, is the gameplay. Like the gameplay itself has become maybe not what it needs to be if you want like PvP to work really well. Like the gameplay itself needs to be restructured, which is the exact opposite of what he said in this video. So like I feel like I kind of disagree on the retail point on many different levels and layers. Now, I'm curious what he's going to say here in terms of comparing SOD to retail, because I've really found them to be pretty different experiences myself after playing both. So yeah, I'm going to back up just a second and then listen to what he has to say.
Class design and some not-so-creative shoehorning of abilities from future expansions. They repurposed dungeons as raids, which was neat, and they incrementally released the game with specific level brackets in mind. On one hand, this replicated the classic beta they claim to be inspired by, but on the other, it is more closely aligned to expansion launches. The level cap increases, the amount of leveling to do is very, very minimal and quick, with tons of catch-up mechanics to make sure that you're never more than a dozen hours away from doing the single new raid available with your friends for like a few weeks before fading back into the brush like Homer Simpson, only to return back for the next expansion.
That's a fair point.
Phase. While this was a fun experiment and just about as inconsequential as anything else in WoW, considering most people playing it knew their beloved characters would be prone to rotting on these servers after a year had passed. Or maybe they'd give you the honor of transferring them to whatever incarnation of Classic they deemed acceptable. But now, it's over, and Blizzard needs to, for the first time in a long time, have the difficult conversation of vision and philosophy. What is Classic Plus as a project? It can't just be another iffy year of throwing half-baked ideas patchwork together by a tiny development team and seeing what sticks, especially.
That's a fair point. That's all fair. Very fair. Absolutely. It's like, yeah, this time it needs to be done right. I think if it's done right, it needs time to cook. Look at RuneScape. RuneScape launched old school in 2012, I think, and it didn't get good till like 2019, 2018. It took like 7 years to cook. Like, if Classic Plus is going to be good, you're going to need to give it many, many years. Maybe not 7, but like many, many years for the team to cook, develop, vote. Like, this thing needs some time. You can't just be like, oh, let's just pop up a Classic Plus. It's, it doesn't work that way.
Actually, when backed by the ever-concerning reality that all of it may be deleted and forgotten. After all, an MMORPG is a promise of persistence. It's the understanding that you are expected to put in a lot of time doing something and not have that time be devalued by future updates or game closures. Now,
absolutely. That's why we play. That's why I play. Like, you put your time into this virtual world with the hope that this virtual world isn't going to be deleted one day or completely changed to devalue everything that you did, right? Yeah, philosophically, that's one of like my biggest gripes against retail in the past couple years, because they've done stuff like that. And it's like, well, that doesn't feel very good now, does it? Right? Like, if you do something, you want it to have some type of meaning because you put time into doing that thing, right? Very simple.
Today, that's not so much the case, as MMOs have become as fleeting as Diablo seasons. But I think WoW players were reminded of what an MMO actually feels like by having to exist in a version of their beloved world that wasn't perverted by some modern design sensibilities. For the first time, some players were able to experience what having player agency feels like. I think the eye-opening moment for a lot of those experiencing Classic for the first time wasn't some general realization of exploration or simple classes, but the broader understanding that at one point, Azeroth felt like an actual place, somewhere to exist in rather than log into. Now, I don't want to just let that semi-meaningless phrase sit there, so let me elaborate as bluntly as I can. This was, in part, because it was grindier, more long-term, and demanded you spend your time playing rather than logging on Reddit and complaining about how much you need to play. Sometime in the next 20 years, there was a player and developer-driven realization that MMOs, which require a lot of time, effort, and commitment, are actually bad. Eventually, due to this, we landed where we are today with retail, and quite frankly, most of the genre, where MMOs have become jobs, not because they demand 8 hours a day, but because they meticulously curate how long you can and can't play and earn something from that play. And the few MMOs that don't feel this way, such as old school RuneScape that give their players the agency to set their own goals and spend dozens, hundreds, thousands of hours to achieve them without ever devaluing those achievements with future content, have been seeing a major resurgence.
That's fair.
In a funny way, Classic WoW's success kind of laid the groundwork for that, the broad realization that this genre exists as time does. It is as inextricably bonded to the concept of giving it your time as you would anything in the real world. There's a reason MMOs were synonymous with second lives, not because you could play a character, but because you genuinely needed to be that character, spend time as them. That's why it's massive, that's why it's multiplayer, and that's why it's online. That's why there are open worlds and hundreds of things to do in them, and why of all video game genres, it's the one that had the most people form faceless relationships with one another through. Finally, whether you have 1 or 10 hours a day to invest.
So like, here's my take on retail. I've been saying this for many, many years. Retail is in this spot where everyone that played it as a kid is getting older. They're getting jobs, they're getting married, they're starting families, they have less time to dedicate to their game. So the retail devs, Blizzard, listens to this and sees this happening, and they're like, crap, we need to mold our game to fit the lifestyles of our aging audience. Okay, so let's make it so that players can play even though they have jobs, kids, etc. The problem is now all of us that are getting older and aging are like, well, this isn't the style of game that I grew up with. This is different, and this isn't what I want. You know, and some people love it. So I'm not speaking for everyone here. This just depends on kind of what kind of gamer you are. That classic style gamer if you want the modern MMO. But the problem lies in you piss off the people that were there from a lot of people that were there from the start. And you're not really attracting a new player base because MMOs aren't really attractive to like the 12-year-olds of today. So you're pissing off the old players. You're not attracting the new players, which means you're getting no new players, right? So like that's not good, right? So I said this, I think back as far as Warlords of Draenor. It's like decide what you want to be. Do you want to be the modern MMO or do you want to be that classic MMO? And I think Blizzard has made it very clear in the last couple of years what their choice has been. Retail is the place if you want the modern MMO experience. If you don't, get out of here, go play classic or go play another game. Like they've made that very clear with these interviews, the dev interviews. They've literally said things verbatim like, we're taking WoW in a brand new direction. We're turning a new page. We're closing the last chapter. Like basically get out of here if you're an old school player. Like this is the game now. It's different, it's new, and it's a modern MMO experience. So that's what retail is in my mind now. And I just look at it that way for the last couple of years, and it's helped me because it's like, okay, yeah, if I want the classic experience, I'll go play classic. I'll go play RuneScape. I will literally do anything but play retail. If I want the modern experience, then retail has a lot to offer, right? But like trying to put retail in that box just doesn't work anymore, right? So
best, you want your investment to mean something. While classic WoW provided that initially, now we're...
So, sorry to pause again, but just to reiterate the point. So if you want that kind of experience, then like if you want this like classic WoW kind of experience, like don't go to retail for it, right? Like it's just not gonna be that thing. Go play classic WoW, go play, I guess I kind of already said that. Go play like a RuneScape. But like I think trying to continue to go back, trying to make this thing into something it's not is just like it's crazy. Like it's not that thing anymore, man. It's just not. It never will be, right? I feel like I'm talking to myself 5 years ago or like maybe 3 years ago even, right? It's like, yeah.
Back in that questionable limbo of where the hell are we going? A lack of reassurance is an MMO non-starter. That's
man.
Why people are hesitant to jump back into a dying game, because why should you invest thousands of hours into something that is on the precipice of non-existence? Thankfully, we have the players to give some feedback. Unfortunately, to create a good game, you need agile, responsive, intelligent developers to take in that feedback and synthesize a correct answer. If game design was as easy as just implementing player feedback, then making games would be so unfathomably simple philosophically. But it's not. And as I said in a prior video, players are like patients at a hospital. They know when something is wrong, but they may not know how to cure it. Players know something is wrong. Very, very wrong. And now they are saying all kinds of stuff in an attempt to cure it, because as a hospital or a doctor, Blizzard has been dead silent for years. They have been leaving us on red, and we're...
That's a fair take, yeah. Like that's completely fair. Like there's something that's wrong, but I think it would be I whenever someone says all you have to do is, I just look at that person and just you're so green, man. You're so like, no. This is a complicated thing to solve. Do I want it solved? More than anything. But if I was in the shoes of Blizzard, I would not be able to solve their problem like quickly. I would have a roadmap and I could try to get there, but it would be a hard thing to do, right? And it would take a long time. And like I think the person that it's like a fool's, it's a fool's what's it called? Like you're a fool if you think you could just solve it by snapping your fingers in one day, right? No, that's not how that works. It's going to take a while. Fool's errand, yeah.
Dying over here. So while we have that one Classic Plus survey and the vague assurance that maybe it'll happen eventually, the more important question is, what will happen eventually? How will it happen eventually? What is Classic Plus to you? The easiest and most common response is it's just more classic, more dungeons, more raids, more endgame content, maybe a few unfinished zones in the original game, and that's sort of it. This will only work in the short term. This is an MMO, and what you're saying Blizzard should do is release the same thing over and over again. This is both something that I think will kill the game, but also something I very well see Blizzard doing, because if there's anything they are competent at, it's making instanced content. Even then, what does that look like? Are we settling for expansions with extra steps, new raids that eventually power creep the old ones? Or if you aren't for power creep, what would itemization even look like half a decade later? Would there be raids with no good loot for certain classes because that well has run dry? Or are we going full send on power scale? Will we be critting for hundreds of thousands, if not millions, like in retail? Stats can occasionally be multiplicative, especially in Classic, where secondary stats often scale additively with their percent-based implementation. I know that's a very granular example, but what does this item that gives plus 2% critical strike chance look like in a decade's time? Do new items give plus 20?
That's a fair question. It's a very fair question, right? Where like you have Scarlet Crusade gear, it's sick. How do you get people amped for that next raid experience? You know?
20% critical strike chance, or are they still just as weak? Neither are tenable options. I don't see a reality where Blizzard is releasing copious amounts of dungeons and raids and not power creeping the game to all hell. Not because they're incompetent, but because when you have a game that's purely motivated by combat and power progression, you need to actually motivate the combat and power progression. Just look at Season of Discovery, a version they pretty bluntly, if slightly sardonically, called Classic Plus More. Other players have realized that just adding expansion content minus the systems and bracketed levels doesn't really change anything other than make more boring versions of expansions. So instead they look toward the single success story in this space, old school RuneScape. I call OSRS a curated sandbox, as I don't believe it is exactly what one thinks of when they think sandbox MMO. It's not open-ended, and it's not only emergent. It's curated. The developers explicitly develop content to synergize with other content. The skills interconnect, the bosses build on one another, and eventually the additive nature of the game creates for dozens of different paths you can choose to go on at any given moment. While a sandbox is open-ended conceptually, old-school RuneScape is more rigid in its structure, and the paths designed are done so, more often than not,
So I was thinking about this the other day. In World of Warcraft, if you're playing solo self-found, or even group self-found, or like a self-imposed guild found, like we did with OnlyFings, it's kind of this way too to some degree. Like, if you're playing Classic WoW, everything's unlocked, and you say go at level 1, you can't just jump into Nax. Like, you have to kind of level and do the level dungeons to do the quests. You get stronger, and when you hit 60, you can't just go straight into Nax. Like, you kind of need to start in Molten Core and get some gear so you can move up to BWL and get more gear. And I mean, you have catch-up raids like ZG and AQ20, and which are a little easier for the gear that you get, and you'll get that gear, but you kind of still need some bosses. You could probably skip AQ40 if you really wanted to and get straight into Nax. But like, the idea is you kind of do need to do all the content to get to that final like raid. You can't really just like skip through. I mean, you can kind of skip here and there, but you could do the same in RuneScape. Now the difference is people don't play self-found. They don't play Iron Man. They don't play group self. They kind of just could hit 60, buy a Nax boost, get full gear, and then quit. But theoretically, I think, I'm not there in RuneScape yet, but I think you could do the same in RuneScape. You could not play Iron Man. You could get boosted on Crab or whatever. You could buy a bunch of gold, buy a bunch of the best gear, and then get to like the end game really quick. But like, you're just robbing yourself of the experience. So why would you do that, right? So that's why I think Iron Man is one of the best things for RuneScape, and why I've been saying for years that solo self-found has brought me joy again in classic WoW, because it like makes the game again. When you play self-found, it's like, all right, cool, let's start from square one and build up an account. So that's why I think self-found is just, it's been amazing. SSF is like the only way to play, I think, at this point, like especially if you've played 50 times already, like myself. It's like, yeah,
intentionally a curated sandbox. WoW isn't a sandbox, curated or not. It's a theme park, meaning the systems that hold it together are vertical and driven by erasure. It's inherently a more shallow and immediate game. That's phrased negatively, but there's a reason it became the most popular MMO ever. It works, and it can be incredibly fun. But these systems don't have the infrastructure needed to become additive in the same way a sandbox is. If old school RuneScape content looks like this, a large orb of things to do with every new update adding a new growth onto it, World of Warcraft looks like this. In Classic anyway, where the leveling is broad and driven by your choice of zones and dungeons and grinds, and then narrows down significantly once you hit max, as you are given one of essentially three options: grind professions for combat and gold, do raids for combat and loot, and PvP for combat and loot. You can do all of these things, but they aren't particularly deep or interconnected, are they? They're just kind of all roundabout means of doing the one thing that WoW has always been good at: killing shit. Even professions are all just a means to that end. The depth of content in WoW's—
it's kind of true. It's kind of true, bro. Like, it's like you know, it's so fun to just slap mobs around in WoW and seeing the big numbers go up. Like, yeah, the combat owns. Like, I'm gonna be honest, like that is WoW's biggest strength. The raids, the M+, the combat, especially in retail. Like, it is fun. Like, it is.
Stems, as I've said, from emergent gameplay, roleplay, open world battles, guild drama, world buff organizations, self-prescribed solo challenges for gold, and etc, etc, etc. These aren't pieces of developed content, but novel, creative approaches in engagement driven entirely by the player base and accepted by the developers. Instanced content on its own in a vacuum doesn't drive this. You can see what I mean by looking at retail or even Season of Discovery. There really aren't any good stories to tell because your only method of communication is driven by insular experiences, and any kind of strategic emergence is often undercut by the heavy hammer of Blizzard's intentional design. If this is Classic's content approach, then this is retail. It's as narrow and shallow as can be. Even when
I think it's not really this thing that's binary. It's not like you are theme park or not. It's more like how theme parky is it, right? On a spectrum. And it's like classic WoW has some theme park elements. Retail WoW has almost none. Well, it feels like almost none. RuneScape, a lot more so, right? So it's not yes or no. It's kind of like how much. And bro, it's what makes Classic so darn fun, right? Like, it's just awesome. But it's hard to, I think, like I said, with retail, it's too far gone. It's doing its thing. Let it do its thing. But for Classic Plus, this is a very real conversation, right? I think, like, that's what I was trying to say earlier. With retail, it's like, I think you let it do its thing. With Classic Plus, we can talk about this stuff because it actually matters. And like, let's try to do this right to the best of our ability, right? But for retail, it's like, they're going to do something separate. That's fine, right?
The depth of class design is incredible, and the actual instanced content is loads more nuanced. The methods through which you're allowed to play are more limited by contrast. Hey, thank you for watching, and a special thank you to the members who support my channel. If you enjoy my content and want to become a member, you'll gain access to all kinds of perks, such as extra unscripted content, shoutouts, and more. Thank you, and back to the video. So, Classic Plus, it can't just be raids and dungeons, right? That won't work for longer than a couple years. Players will eventually get sick of the same cycle of content.
I mean, I think raids and dungeons have to be a big part of it because that's what WoW is. But like, it is problematic. Like, where do you go after 10 years of this, right? I mean, but you could say the same with RuneScape, right? Like, RuneScape has so much content that it's like freaky to even look at, and you can't just go right into the end without doing all the other content to get to get strong enough. So like, I think you can actually do that for a while, but I think implementing, I mean, there is a solo self-found mode already. I think Iron Man is a big key to the success of RuneScape. I think so many players have found so much fun through Iron Man to reinvigorate the game mode. And I think solo self-found probably be a big part of Classic Plus, to be honest. And then I was going to say something else. I think in addition to the raids in the dungeons, you need like cool quests, like we had at the end of SOD Phase 8. We had the Secret Agent quest line, like more stuff like that for the sunglasses, like cool cosmetic quest lines and reasons to actually log in and play the game are awesome. And that's kind of what keeps, RuneScape kind of in that content cycle as well. I think that the biggest thing WoW could do, in my opinion, is look at the experience that RuneScape has. OSR is launched in 2012. It didn't get good till 2019, right? Like, it took 7 years to build up to this thing. They have a massive head start on Classic Plus. You look at history, you become educated on why did this work, how did it work, what worked, what didn't work, and just learn from it. Not that you have to copy paste it, but just learn from it, understand it, and then use what you've learned to build a successful Classic Plus, right? I think turning a blind eye to it would be crazy, right? Because they're further along in the product life cycle. Like, quite literally, they're further along.
Don't believe me? Here's Season of Discovery's population chart, or the best that the players have managed to figure out due to Blizzard's secrecy over actual player counts. It peaked immediately and then drastically dropped off, even when they added a properly new raid to the game. This is in major part due to Season of Discovery being seasonal. It's in the name.
Okay. Let me just explain this chart a little bit because I think it is a little misleading. I mean, so these are the numbers. This was phase 1. This is phase 2. This is phase 3. And then it kind of gets muddled. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever. And then this is where they decided, okay, we're not going to actually do anything, and everyone quit, right? Which makes sense. Now, I would make the claim that phase 8 was the best phase, okay? And I think a lot of the players that played SOD throughout would also say phase 8 was the best phase. A lot of the players that quit in phase 1 would say phase 1 is the best phase because you quit in phase 1. Now, let me just make this argument. I would argue that if you released phase 8 in November 2023, this peak would have been even higher. Because phase 8 to me was a better gaming experience on many levels than phase 1 was. So, but the numbers don't reflect that. Why? Well, my theory would be that this was unknown. No one knew what it was yet. No one knew what it could be yet. This is Classic Plus at its unknown. What is this going to be? What is it? What is it? So this is Classic Plus Curiosity. The 500,000 player peak is Classic Plus Curiosity. And then, I guess to interrupt myself in that train of thought, this 500k player peak is not really 500k player peak because the raid was a level 25 raid, which means every player on SOD had like 3 alts, 4 alts, 5 alts. So when phase 2 came out, you had to hit 40, which means more of a grind, which means less alts. So there's like a real reality in which phase 2 player count in terms of individual players was actually somewhat close to phase 1, but people had significantly less alts. And then you could say the same is also true. So like, I wonder what this graph would look like in 2 different cases. One, if phase 8 launched in November 2023, how this would look, right? And I think very, very different. And then 2, if this graph was redistributed for accounting for alts, and I think also very, very different. So I mean, there's a lot of things to keep in mind when you look at numbers, right? Like a graph can be manipulated to show anything, but you have to kind of understand the intricacies before just looking at numbers, right? Just be like, okay, so what does this actually mean in reality? So anyway, a little bit of background on this graph. Let's keep going.
And therefore on a timer, making players less likely to invest their lives into it. But also because if all classic players want is a new raid, they would just play retail. Oh, but classes are too complicated. Don't worry, you can now press one button just like in Classic. Here you go. Is that it then? Is Classic Plus dead in the water? Well, there's another thing that made it to the water. Turtles. That's so stupid. I'd be remiss to not discuss the turtle of it all. If you aren't aware, it's likely the most popular WoW private server. Private servers are a funny thing for World of Warcraft because they're like harbingers of the future. They predict what's coming, whether it be Nostalrius leading directly to Classic WoW or the many Classic Plus incarnations that will lead into Classic Plus. Once Blizzard capitalized on releasing a classic version of WoW, private servers who did just that gave up their market to a slightly more consistent product. Everyone who wanted an old school version of WoW could go and finally play that officially, and today, everyone who wants a Classic Plus has had some options to peek behind the curtain and entertain some possibilities. Turtle WoW has been a long-running project that sought to bring the most faithful interpretation of what a Classic Plus can look like.
All of this looks so awesome. I wish it was official. Oh my gosh. I would argue though that like for every person that plays Turtle WoW, there's like 10 times as many people that would play, but they don't want to invest their time in a private server that's probably going to be shut down. Would you guys generally agree with that? Like, there's so many more people that want Classic Plus than Turtle WoW population. Like, there's so many more. You guys agree? Yeah. Like I want to play, for example, but like, I'm not going to invest time into something that's probably getting shut down, and it's against TOS and it's illegal. So it's like super bad. But the concepts, it looks so fun. So it's like, dude, I think the amount of people that would like a Classic Plus, like a true Classic Plus experience like Turtle WoW is offering is just crazy. Maybe that's copium. Maybe I'm wrong. But I think maybe I'm in my own little bubble. You know, maybe I am. But like, gosh, I know I would have fun. I'll say that much.
Instead of just importing retail systems like Blizzard wants to do, housing, really? Can you name a more fucking tone-deaf system than a fully cosmetic instanced housing system in classic World of Warcraft? You can. It's called Transmog, and it was also on the survey. Regardless, Turtle WoW augments the classic experience by expanding zones, adding new ones, creating new professions, and thousands of new items, and so on.
Yeah,
it's essentially
sick.
Classic Plus in the most reasonable sense, and one that I think Blizzard could maybe pull off. Now, I know that in and of itself sounds pathetic. I think maybe the billion-dollar corporation might be able to match the quality of a few fans, but that's where we're at today. This is, again, not because Blizzard developers are incompetent. There's nothing inherently wrong with the development team, but because Blizzard as a whole has no connective understanding of what made classic WoW good. And whatever filters down from
You want to know the reality with what's going on? There's a lot of people working at Blizzard with some really darn good ideas. But you are working at a massive company and you need to get it approved by your boss and your boss's boss and your boss's boss's boss and your boss's 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 boss. And then it might take 2 to 3 years to get like maybe that sounds like a good idea for 2 to 3 years from now. It's just a massive company, right? That's the downside of massive companies, is it's harder to move quick, right? The upside of small companies like a Turtle WoW is, if you want to call them a company, which I guess you could, is there's a lot of passion and they're small, so they can move very quick. That's the upside of a small company, right? So it's like quite literally, like, because I mean, guys, I know a lot of these people that work at Blizzard. Like, they're cool people. They've been playing WoW their whole lives, and like a lot of them, I'm just gonna say it, have their hands tied because I mean, you guys know when you work a job, is it up to you or is it up to your boss and your boss's boss? Like, you can't do everything you want when you're working at a massive company. That's the reality. That's the truth. And I hope people understand that, right? So yeah.
Management or their creative directors is so diluted and synthetic that it probably tastes like poison to the developers who are shackled to their desks and forced to implement another 1,700 recolors of the same mount onto the trading post. And history tends to repeat itself, with Blizzard suing the developers of Turtle WoW. This is expected. Everybody playing private servers must know, the developers included, that this is an impermanent detour. Naturally, the most competent people at Blizzard are their lawyers, so they can utilize this to snuff out the self-perpetuated competition before launching their standardized version. Now, that's not to say Blizzard's actions are unreasonable. It's their IP, legally, and they can very well do with it as they please. With that said, I feel as though there were ways to create a more amicable relationship with those creating a product that is at this point more conceptually and systemically interesting than anything Blizzard has made in like a decade. Remember, the people playing Turtle WoW are also going to be the ones playing your version of Classic Plus too. In my perfect world, approaching this situation as some developers have modding would lead to a better relationship with your fans, but I'm not privy to the facts of the matter, so I will leave my speculation there. The lawsuit is undeniably legitimate and warranted. Instead, I'm a lot more compelled to think about the reasons for all of this to come about in the first place. Private servers within the Warcraft ecosystem have always been responses to what WoW itself lacked, doing what Blizzard hadn't or couldn't. As mentioned, it started with Classic WoW and now is revolving around Classic Plus. Blizzard's inability to be even remotely agile as this lumbering, obese, megalithic corporation suspended in the air like an impotent Baron Harkonnen has put them in the undesirable position of needing to retroactively mend cuts that have already scarred over. They delivered Classic WoW years too late, and now they are likely scrambling to come up with a cost-effective Classic Plus. But even Turtle WoW has issues, conceptually I mean. It's a very interesting peek into what Classic Plus...
Oh my gosh, that looks so fun. It looks so fun.
has issues, conceptually I mean. It's a very...
Stunning Imperial Gemstone, Imperial Topaz Purple. Blizzard, please. Blizzard, please. Blizzard, please.
Very interesting peek into what Classic Plus could be, but it's also a narrow one, demographically speaking. The population that has enjoyed it is relatively small by comparison to the one that Blizzard needs to attract to sustain a full-scale development of a different version of WoW. That's the second, slightly more sympathetic argument I can think of. Blizzard is between a rock and a hard place. If they need to create what amounts to be a sustainable amount of content for a theme park MMO like WoW, they're going to need at least 100 developers on the project.
That is true. If you want a live update game, or what's it called, live service game, with updates coming out regularly, with new stuff that is like what the community wants, but like, you know, new content to feed life into the game, you need a development team. I don't know if Blizzard is approving that for the Classic team. I think the Classic team is more like their hands are tied on a budget. They're going to do the best they can on their budget, and they're going to give us stuff, what they can do based on that budget. But I don't know if they're going to be able to get the approval to be like, hey, look, we need like 100 people on this full time to just like send this thing to the moon. Like, I don't know. What my hope is that with SOD, they saw enough there to get more approval. And then I hope that we get a version of Classic Plus on launch that like has enough hype to where we get more budget and more approval, and it kind of grows into this thing that's like, okay, yeah, people want this. I hope.
And suddenly, what was held together by shoestrings attached to rusty cogs, lubed up by stolen breast milk, is now a full-scale operation. One that needs a substantial budget and return to sustain. It may not be totally reasonable for the executives to greenlight such a project. If we want a version of Classic Plus with a proper content cadence that allows you to play for as long as you did back in 2019 without immense content droughts, then are you willing to shoulder shitty monetization schemes? The answer should be no. WoW tokens, which likely would be added, whether it be immediately or after enough players have sufficiently sunk costed their way into endgame rating, may also exist beside cosmetics. There's a reason why Blizzard is considering transmog, cosmetic overrides, as a system to include. We also have seen them cross-port models between versions, which allows them to do the same with the deluge of cosmetic glut populating retail WoW. Sure, this allows for some level of horizontal repurposing of outmoded content through cosmetic collection, but it also allows them to monetize it to all hell. This is not a novel realization. They added a fucking WoW token to Wrath of the Lich King Classic, which was literally just a re-release of an expansion. It was like 4 developers locked in a cage getting fed hamster food and working on a single Macintosh from 2007. That's hyperbole, but obviously the scale of these projects would be different by comparison. Blizzard needs that wide demographic to even consider a standard monetization model. Let's defer back to the initial topic. What is Classic Plus? Sadly, I don't have an answer. I've heard options.
So from my understanding, Classic isn't isn't a very great money maker from Blizzard's perspective, right? Classic is more a side thing, right? Like retail per subscriber makes them more money. Why? Well, because people can buy like more gold to fuel their accounts. There's character transfers. There's name. I guess you can do a lot of that stuff in Classic too, but there's more like mounts you can buy, pets you can buy. So like per subscriber, from my understanding, is like way more valuable to get people on retail. That's why Blizzard wants to get people on retail. But I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that. Like look at the Costco business model. You sell things, some things at cost to get people in the door, right? Like the rotisserie chickens in the back, right, are famously known at Costco to be sold like at cost or even at a slight loss sometimes or whatever, just to get people in the door so that they spend money on other things. Maybe Classic Plus, Blizzard, could be that thing where you make out of just like you put it there and it's awesome to get people in the door to maybe hop on retail or not. And then like it's just kind of maybe you don't need to monetize and squeeze the heck out of it. I don't know, just a concept. A lot of companies do this. You know, maybe just give us a perfect Classic Plus. Don't squeeze it. No WoW token. No crazy cosmetics. This that. Just like make a great Classic Plus to get people back into WoW. Yeah, it's called a loss leader. That's exactly right. Make Classic Plus the loss leader to get people in the door. Please.
And all of them sound holistically unconvincing. Adding some new zones and raids wouldn't be sustainable. It completely misses the point, the appeal of WoW. I think adding new leveling content would be very cool thematically, but a huge time investment for little return. I'd love to see new leveling zones and expansions on old ones, but that can't be the selling point of the game because for most players, it's a one-time experience. And ultimately, the third option would be to make WoW a sandbox, or as close to one as possible. Turtle WoW has already been leaning heavier into this, an effort to sustain pre-existing content while employing the additive formula of old-school RuneScape. It may be the only option that sees the game survive for longer than a year or two. But by doing so, would it even be WoW anymore? If we uproot the subgenre that it in many ways perfected and transition it into another one, how much of that DNA will still be there? In some ways, it's like the ship of Theseus. In an attempt to replicate success, we begin to slowly rip apart the core of the game, reshape it into the version that we always wanted it to be. But in the process, is it the original anymore? How can it be Classic Plus when the plus is subsuming the classic? I would still prefer this though. I would rather see Blizzard swing for the fences and attempt to synthesize the gameplay and design people love into a more sustainable package for the future. If you agree, let's think of what that could look like in a general sense. For one, the entire itemization process would need to completely change. There would need to be entirely new systems added to the game, more interconnected elements.
One of the things that RuneScape does with itemization is it creates bosses that need certain things. Like we were doing a boss on RuneScape yesterday called Huey. Huey needed a crush weapon. I had a dragon skim, which is my best weapon in the game, but it's slash. So I needed to get a crush weapon, so I ended up getting a rune mace, which is a worse weapon, but it had the itemization needed for this specific boss. That's kind of cool, right? So it's like you could release a new raid in WoW that requires different gear sets. And I'm not just talking about extra fire resistance and molten core, right? Like something a little different than that. But like, okay, I need this item set for this raid and this item set for that raid, and that's going to give me a reason to go around and get all these item sets. Like, I liked that.
Its professions, perhaps even allowing everyone to be every profession and exponentially increasing the amount of time needed to level them up.
Okay, so for self-found characters in Classic Plus, this is a very interesting conversation. If you're self-found in Classic Plus, should you be able to unlock all professions so that you could actually create kind of like this RuneScape account where you could kind of build up your account? You can't trade or use the auction house, so it's just for you, but you can make your own armor and enchant it too. That would be interesting. I don't know the answer, but that would be an interesting conversation.
Kind of creating a RuneScape-esque progression, adding dozens, if not hundreds, of new profession-specific items that enhance your gameplay, building up a world where you're just as likely to go to Stone Talon Mountains as you are Black Rock Mountain. Adding horizontal systems that aren't just facilitating combat, but rather act as entirely new avenues of gameplay with enough depth to mimic that of combat. Things that you're excited to log into and do, and spend weeks grinding without ever needing to touch any of the traditionally Warcraft endgame.
Guys, I'm gonna be honest. This like, to make Classic Plus into what it needs to be is a complex thing. I'm gonna be honest, if I wanted to give better suggestions, I would need to study game design for a while. Like, straight up, I would need to understand these things. I've been a WoW player for 21 years. I've been playing games my whole life. I still think I would need to become more educated to really do this how it needs to be done. Like, these things aren't simple. Like, on the surface, they're simple, but when you start thinking about it, it's like, crap, is this a good idea or is it not? Is this going to be played out in a month or is it not? Is this going to have the longevity? Is this going to be exciting? Like, I would have to study it. I'm going to be honest. Straight up.
And finally, having the foresight and confidence needed to exist alongside player-driven emergence. It requires such a deft hand, such a nuanced and impressive understanding of World of Warcraft that I'm not sure anyone can pull it off.
Yeah, that's what I just said. That's exactly right. It requires so much knowledge. Like, even for someone like me who's been playing my whole life, I think I would need to just study more. I'd be like, okay, what do we actually do here? Like, it's like, if you're going to be honest with yourself, it would be a pretty hard task, right? And whatever you do, you can guarantee one thing, that you're going to have hundreds or thousands of players yelling at you that you suck no matter what you did. Man, being a game dev sounds terrible. Oh my gosh.
Because that's what RuneScape is. The benefit of old school RuneScape is that it has always been that, but the understanding of how to harness this has only improved in time. Today, our developers are very in tune with the systems of the sandbox, but only after years of trials and failures. It took the game dying, arguably twice, and being born again to iron out a long-term vision.
That's what I said. It takes just so many years to do this thing right, you know?
Blizzard has not communicated anything to anyone. I'd be surprised if even the developers know what the future holds for this yet unannounced but kind of announced project. How is anyone to feel confident that they're in good hands when they can't even see the hands holding them? It's a maddening process. If there's anything I will advocate for, it's to be honest with your interests and forceful with your intentions. We're not talking old school RuneScape here. Jagex has had—
Who is playing this gameplay? This is some solid gameplay, man. All those swaps that quick, not getting hits. Like, all right, there we go.
well over a decade to become agile and responsive to their community, and has integrated a controversial but exceptional polling system that gives a voice to players that all generally agree on what old school RuneScape is, what its future looks like. That's not without plenty of drama, but a skiller, a top-end PVMer, and a new player can all identify the overarching identity of old school RuneScape. The same cannot be said about Classic Plus. The community behind this concept needs time to evolve with it, but time itself is of the essence. There won't be a decade of mistakes because Blizzard's investment needs to be a lot more expensive to create a sustainable product. A sandbox, curated or not, is great at repurposing content and creating huge releases out of a comparably small amount of development time. Because old school RuneScape is long-form, incremental, and ever-growing, the developers can release a piece of content that will take months to complete without people batting an eye because they know that it will always be there. It won't be deleted with a seasonal update.
Hey, that's Huey. That's what we killed yesterday. Sick.
Or an expansion. That is the subgenre Diffie. Even vanilla WoW all the way back in 2004 never had this luxury. Things were certainly more relevant for a longer period of time, but at this point, that strikes me more as a happy accident than an intended piece of design. The fact that Molten Core gear remained somewhat relevant in Naxxramas could have very well been because Blizzard's developers had yet to fully grasp the intricacies of their own itemization. And we've seen as much in Season of Discovery, sanding down the rough edges of item design to facilitate a more linear progression. Now, I want to ask you if just a half-year cycle of patches adding a new raid, maybe a new dungeon, and perhaps even some overworld stuff to do, whether that be a zone expansion or new leveling content, would be enough to retain your excitement about the game. Not now, but years later. The benefit—
I think to retain attention long term, I think one of the keys for RuneScape is its Iron Man experience, and I think one of the keys for WoW could be the self-found experience, maybe the multi-profession self-found experience, where like if you can just game it to the end, you like players are going to get there quick and raid log and get bored. Like you need to somewhat game it, and then the hardcore self-found experience to try to do it all without dying. Players that have been playing RuneScape for a very long time, like they've played to the end on a main, and they're like, okay, let me make an Iron Man, right? I think it goes really, really well with the concept. So I don't know. And then in terms of the cadence, I don't know. I'd say something to look forward to every many weeks or many months. I think if there's nothing in 6 months, that's too long, right? Like we would need something, even if it's something small, but just like something to kind of jump in and enjoy, like even something as small as like a fishing event, like something random just to like, oh, players are logging in. Okay, cool. Like every few weeks or every few months. I think if it goes 6 months with nothing, I think that's probably too much.
Of a classic WoW release is that there are two enormous continents to journey through in your task to get max level. A single new zone or minor expansion doesn't add that.
Bro, that's a really cool map. I kind of want to get this map and frame it in my room somewhere. Yeah, that'd be rad.
Agency. Hell, even a fully new continent doesn't add that, as we've seen with the expansions that followed. So when I say be forceful with intent, I mean that you should, as a huge WoW fan, consider what it means to be playing a Classic Plus. Not now or in a year, but maybe in 5 years, 10. What does the game look like? What does—
This guy thinks just like me. That's exactly how I think. It's like, how can we make Classic Plus something awesome to play like 10 years from now? Not like, oh, this will be sick for 3 months and we'll quit. It's like, no, how can we make Classic Plus into something we're all going to be playing and enjoying 10 years from now? Because that's what RuneScape managed, right? And it's possible. Turtle WoW on the verge of it. Like it's managing it. Like I think it's possible, but it's like you have to think with long-term horizons and you have to think without short-term profits in mind. Okay, I think it has to maybe be a loss leader for Blizzard, and they have to accept that. We'll see. I don't know.
What does your gameplay look like? Whatever the answer to that is, I hope it's not yet another path to where we currently are today.
Well, that's a pretty good video. I actually agreed with a ton of this stuff. I enjoyed that. Okay, I've made a claim before, and I think this would be the reason it would be profitable for Blizzard to try this in the long term to see if it could be successful, is there's been like 100 million plus people that have tried WoW over the last 20 years. And most of those people don't play anymore. So say there's 5 million people playing. It's probably less, but just say 5, doesn't matter. And say 100 million people have tried it. That means 95 million people aren't playing WoW that have played in the past. And a lot of those people really enjoy playing the game, but they've quit for one reason or another, right? That's a massive amount of people to market to. And I'm not even talking about marketing to new audiences. I'm talking to marketing Classic Plus to the people that have quit WoW for one reason or another and to return it to its former glory. That is a massive audience to market it to. I feel like it wouldn't be that crazy to say like this thing could be massive, right? Like, would I even make the claim that it could be bigger than retail in like 10 years from now? I mean, it happened with RuneScape. I don't know if I want to go on record saying that, but maybe I would. I feel like Classic Plus has the potential, if you gave it enough love and enough time and enough attention for long enough, that it could just become, it could become bigger than retail. Okay. All right.